Well, this morning we are going to continue on in our series called Broken Barriers. And the last 2 weeks we had discussed how sin is no longer a barrier between us and God. Sometimes we think we can't get to God because of the things that we have done in our past. And we learned that that's not true at all. In fact, Jesus made sure that was not the case. And forgiveness to sin and living a life with God is completely free and available to every single person, no matter what we've done. Last week we talked about how we can be, the barrier of slavery to sin can be broken. That sin does not have to live in our lives, and God can work in our lives so much that we don't want to sin. We don't have to sin. We don't have to do things that hurt God and hurt others. Well, this week we're going a little bit further in the journey. Because let's be honest, the journey with God starts with us asking for forgiveness and Him working in our lives to get us away from what has held us back, and that would be sin. So this week, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. It's not centered around sin anymore. Instead, it's centered on what God is calling us specifically to do in this world. So before we get there, though, I want to talk about something that all of us love. I'm pretty sure everybody loves this. If you don't love this, I question some things. But 80s movies, right? I start with that, right? 80s movies. It's like, oh no, there's some bad 80s movies. But in 80s movies, there was this use in 80s movies that became very, very popular. And I'm pretty sure everybody loves this thing that they call in 80s movies, okay? Now, I'm going to dance around the bush for a little bit, okay? This narrative use in film was used in Rocky movies. It was used in The Karate Kid. It was used in Dirty Dancing. It was used in Pretty Woman. This part of a movie was used in all those movies, and you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what does Pretty Woman have in common with Rocky and Karate Kid with Dirty Dancing? Well, it's when the director takes a group of scenes together as the main character or characters are preparing or receiving or getting or assembling something so that they can meet the main conflict or get to their goal. And usually this string of scenes has the best music behind it. There's no dialogue at all. But you have such great songs that you've heard as Eye of the Tiger. Do you know what I'm talking about now? It starts with an M, a montage, right? A montage is something that all of us love in movies because you see a character get ready for what they need to do, whether it be, again, go against the conflict that they have been doing or get to a goal. And a montage is a wonderful way to show the work and the time that's involved, but in a very short amount of time. I mean, let's be honest. Rocky would be a lot more boring if an hour of it was just him training and him talking. But no, what do we get? We get Eye of the Tiger. He's punching. He's going. He's running down the streets of Philadelphia and goes up to the top. And seriously. Whew, just gives me chills right now. Montages are a great way to display the hard work that somebody has to do to achieve a goal. Now, you and I both know that for us personally, to achieve a goal or do something that we are hoping to do, it's not such a simple 2-minute thing. In fact, you know that there are days upon weeks upon years of training and discipline, of blood and sweat and tears, of studying, of recollecting everything, whether it be something that's physical, like, running a marathon. If anybody's ever trained for a marathon, you know how grueling and how much work it is. But some of us are more on the mental things, like getting ready to graduate from college or from graduate school, and the amount of work and recollecting. It's a lot of work, right? If you ever wanted to lose weight, a lot of work is put into that, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? And whenever we finally get to that goal, how do we feel? How do you feel? How many of you achieved a goal in your life before? Okay, good. I'm glad. There are no underachievers here. And how did you feel when you achieved that goal? Really great, right? And there are some things that come alongside getting to that goal too, right? There are some benefits. Like, for example, if you were working really hard to get that promotion at work, there are certain financial benefits with it, right? There's sometimes social benefits. In high school, we talk about if you're like the star football player, you get social benefits of being the dude, right? There's benefits that come after working really hard and achieving your goal. But you and I also know that there are some things that we can't do, right? There are some of us, let's be honest, we're never going to become nuclear physicists. Or we're never going to become star wide receivers in the NFL. Or we're not going to become... those are the two things that just pop off the top of my head. Those things are really hard to get. I mean, for example, if you struggle with math, like if it's very hard for your brain to wrap around math, nuclear physics probably isn't going to be the thing you want to go right into with your life. And if you have a issue with your knee and you can't run really, really fast, being a wide receiver is going to be pretty hard to be. So we also know that even though we may work hard and we may achieve goals, there are some goals that we just don't even try because of our own limitations as human beings, right? You're like, oh, you were talking about montages. I was so happy. Now you've like totally put me in the ditch. Your talk is so emotional. But I wondered, as I was thinking through all of these different kinds of way that we do life and try to achieve goals and what we don't even try in the first place, what happens when God calls us to do something? What happens when God calls us specifically to do something that may seem like it would be a lot of work, or it might even seem impossible, or it might seem like really, really, really hard? What happens when God calls us? Is it about work? Is it about, what is it about? And then when we achieve those goals, when we totally answer the call, what do we do with the benefits on the other side of it? That's what we're going to look at today. Now, I'm going to bring you right back up, okay? I'm going to bring you right back up, okay? If God calls you to do something in your life, okay, do it. Because guess what? He will break down every barrier to do His will. Not yours. Let's be careful here. This is about what God has called you to do, what He has called you to do, okay? And there will be no barriers that will be kept up for you to do what He asks. The reason I know this is because this thing, this really big book, there's a lot of accounts of when God asked His people to do things that seemed impossible, and yet He made a way. But it even goes further than just a book. Because some of us here today might still be like a little unsure about, the Bible and exactly what it means and things like that. Well, let me share with you from my own personal perspective that I have seen God break down walls for people and myself, include within that category, to do what He wanted to do. Let me just share with you just a brief story about me. I am sorry. In school, in elementary and middle and high school, I was the math science guru. I wanted to be a meteorologist originally. I wanted to lie to people for a living. No, I'm just kidding. Let's be honest. Meteorology has come a long way. It really has. But in all honesty, though, I was great at seeing what was in front of me and moving it forward and proving it. I had to have evidence to understand something. That was the way I thought. Very black, white. It's either there or it's not. And then think about me going to college and then feeling this distinct call to go into ministry. And then you look at what you have to take in college to become a pastor, and they have this thing called philosophy. Now, if anybody has ever read any kind of philosophical work past the Greek philosophers, you know that philosophers are maybe crazy. Because you see, in math and science, you have, figures like 1 + 1 = 2. Granted, I've heard that that's even not always true. I don't know. In any case, but 1 + 1 = 2. But then you go to philosophy, and they say the world is based upon what we can see and experience. And is it really there if we don't experience it? And your brain's like, what are you talking about? Or at least that's what my brain does. Now, some of you are like, that makes sense, actually. But for me, it was very difficult. And I had this big barrier, I remember, in my freshman year of college. Like, how am I going to do this, Lord? I'm telling you, He works. I see far more, I understand far more things than I ever thought was possible in my life. So I just share that with you. So in any case, today what we're going to look at is a distinct time when God was calling His people to do something that seemed impossible. And then what it really meant. Today we're going to be in Joshua, and we're going to begin in chapter 5, beginning with verse 13. And let me bring you up to speed. Last week we talked about how God saved the Israelites from Egypt in slavery. Do you remember this? They get to the big sea, the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, and they're like, what do we do? And God opens it and they cross and they become free from the Egyptians. Well, after that, they went through the wilderness for a number of years. And the Israelites receive this thing called the Ten Commandments. How to live life. How to live like God wants them to live. But even though God saved them, like it was pretty obvious that God did some great work, and what He brought to them, the Ten Commandments, were something that was good for them, they still disobeyed. They still wouldn't always trust in God. And after this number of years, they finally are getting to the land that was promised to them originally. That's been the goal for so long. And they get to the land, and they look across the way, and they say, there's people there. That's supposed to be our land, but there's people there. This is a problem. What are we going to do? And that's sort of where we pick up in Joshua. The people of God are looking to move into Canaan, and they come to the city of Jericho. And Jericho was a very well fortified city. It was right on a river. It was hard to attack. I mean, there's nothing easy about taking Jericho and just moving in. At the same time, you have these Canaanites too that are there that are living in that space. So how are they supposed to live there if it was promised to them? So that's where they're at. And their new leader is Joshua. And so we pick up in the story in Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up. He caught sight of a man standing in front of him with his sword drawn. Joshua went up and said to him, are you on our side or that of our enemies? And he said, neither. I'm the commander of the Lord's heavenly force. Now I have arrived. Then Joshua fell flat on his face and worshipped. Joshua said to him, what is my master saying to his servant? And the commander of the Lord's heavenly force said to Joshua, take your sandals off your feet, because the place where you are standing is holy. So Joshua did this. Now Jericho was closed up tightly because of the Israelites. No one went out or came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, look, I have given Jericho and its king into your power. along with its mighty warriors. Circle the city with all the soldiers going around the city one time. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets made from ram's horns in front of the chests. And on the 7th day, circle the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. Have them blow a long blast on the ram's horn. And as soon as you hear that trumpet blast, have all the people shout a loud war cry. Then the city wall will collapse, and the people will rise up, attacking straight ahead. Again, Joshua finds this guy standing out there, and he's like, who is this dude? He goes up, like we live in a world of about security, right? You just see a guy you've never seen before just hanging out, and you're like, is this a enemy, or is he with us? So he goes and asks him, and he goes, who are you? I'm from the Lord. I'm the one who is going to lead you. And the one thing that we find out, the reason why Joshua knows that this guy was sent from the Lord is because of this. Take off your sandals, for you stand on holy ground. Moses was asked that same exact thing to do whenever God was calling him in the Exodus. So he finds out, okay, so God's here. God's here to give us a battle plan. Great, let's figure out how we're going to take Jericho. And then he starts telling them what they're going to do. And you're thinking military strategy, catapults, and how do we break down doors and walls and big artillery. Obviously they don't have guns in this time, but as big of stuff that they can do to get through these walls. And he says this, for 6 days you're going to walk around the city. And then on the 7th day, you're going to walk around it 7 times. And you're going to blow some trumpets. And then you're going to yell really loud. And the walls are going to come down. Okay. Sounds a lot less work than I was expecting. But, also doesn't sound really physically possible. But this is what he asks him to do. This is what he asked the people to do. And we come to this point of so God is asking us to take Canaan by doing something really, really weird. They come to the point of, do we trust God to do this? Or are we going to look like imbeciles? We're just going to march around 6 times. What happened? Nothing. Now, it's really important, too. I want to go back. I don't want to, spend too much time on the sandals. But the sandals were an important part of why God said to do it in this way. Because what God is saying is, I'm going to be doing this work. I'm going to tell you to do what to do, but it's not what you're going to do. It's what I'm going to do. And the sandals signified a lot of things in the Bible. It usually meant that you were pretty well off. You could take care of yourself. You could go do business transactions. You could go do something. It was about you as a human being being able to do something that you could do. To take off sandals signifies that what's about to happen is not based on anything that the Israelites do, but on everything that God does. So I'm here to tell you, when God asks you to do something, it might be weird. And it might be in a way that you never thought was possible. But when he does, do it. Because as you continue to read, they do exactly what God asks. They go around 6 days in a row. They march around. And we join up again in the story in verse 15. On the 7th day, whenever they're about to blow the horns and yell. Okay? On the 7th day, they got up at dawn. They circled the city in this way 7 times. And it was only on that day that they circled the city 7 times. And the 7th time, the priests blew the trumpets. Then Joshua said to the people, shout, because the Lord has given you the city. The city and everything in it is to be utterly wiped out as something reserved for the Lord. And only Rahab, the prostitute, is to stay alive, along with everyone with her in her house. This is because she hid the messengers we sent. But you keep away from the things set aside for God, so that you don't desire and take some of the things reserved. That would turn the camp of Israel into a thing doomed to be utterly wiped out and bring calamity on it. All silver and gold, along with bronze and iron equipment, are holy to the Lord. They must go into the Lord's treasury. Then the people shouted. They blew the trumpets. And as soon as the people heard the trumpet blast, they shouted a loud war cry, and the wall collapsed. The people went up against the city, attacking straight ahead. They captured the city, and without mercy, they wiped out everything in the city as something reserved for God: man and woman, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. God did what he said he was going to do. Amen? Amen. Now, here's the thing. Most pastors would just stop and say, look, there's no barrier that stands between you and doing what God asks you to do. But there's something about this passage that probably doesn't sit well with us. The whole murdering everybody. Doesn't that, it's just like, ooh. It's like, yeah, and then it got really dark. Well, I really looked into this. And what I found out was that the Battle of Jericho is far less about the walls coming down than it is about what God asks from us as we follow him. Okay? So just sit tight here real quick, okay? We're going to do some things. We're going to talk in some Hebrew. Okay? Around verse 17, there was this part that says, something reserved for the Lord. Okay? And it's used several times, reserved, and how all the spoils are supposed to go to the Lord. All of these different kinds of things. And then it says, kill everybody. Okay? The word that's used there is harem. Got to use some gutturals. You want to say it with me? Harem. Ooh. Are you okay? Do you need to go spit now? Now, harem, this is not the first time that this word is used in the Old Testament. In fact, it's originally used in Deuteronomy, when God is telling the people on how to do these kinds of things, these kinds of battles, these kinds of wars. And essentially what harem is, it says, you're going to take everything, I'm going to provide for you as you go into war, but as you get all the stuff from war, all the loot, all the spoils, all the money, all the weapons, all the livestock, all the people, you are to give it to God. That's what harem means. You set it aside for God. So all the different benefits of taking Jericho isn't about the Israelites looting and plundering and getting everything. In fact, they're going to take everything that was there and put it in the Lord's treasury. Now here comes the glaring thing that really bugs us. Why ask them to kill everybody? Why is killing the people something that is reserved for God, setting it aside for God? Well, God asked the people to do this for several reasons, okay? First of all, God's like a parent, okay? He's like a big dad. And as they're going into Jericho, the Canaanites worshipped other gods. They worshipped gods that were not the one true God. And so what he does, he says, you are to take them out and give them to me by killing them in a way that I am going to protect you from falling into temptation of worshiping their gods. And you're like, this still feels wrong. They're still killing people. And I agree. I'm not trying to put a lipstick on a pig here. I'm just telling you the theological reasons for this, okay? It was to protect the people who were very young in their faith. It's like having a kid, really. I mean, think about it. How many of you allow your kids to play with dangerous things? How many of us go put all the things in the wall outlets? How many of us put the plastic thing in there, right? You're taking away the possibility for them to get hurt and to fall. So that's one reason, okay? The other reason for harem, I just like saying it, is this, okay? I lost my spot. It was also so that God would receive everything. The Israelites would actually gain nothing except for Jericho on that day. Because you have to see, with all the spoils and all the loot and all those people, are tons of possibilities for the people of Israel to get rich and to enslave the Canaanites. Now, I want you to really think about this, okay? The Israelites were enslaved last week by Pharaoh. Do you think God wants his people to do the same thing that was done to them? No. And so, it's a measure that is put into place so that injustice does not flow through the land of Israel. And it also keeps the Israelites completely and utterly dependent upon God. Because they're basically saying, ooh, look what I did. I got all this stuff and I got all these slaves and now I don't have to worry about anything. I can do whatever I want. I'm rich. No, they can't do that because they are giving everything back to God and they still are to be dependent upon God. So you see, the Battle of Jericho, even though it's really awesome and we always get really excited. The walls come tumbling down. Look what God does. It comes with a way of life. And that way of life is this: completely dependent upon God for everything. Now, for us, what does it mean to us? Does this mean that we can go and take down cities and kill everybody? No. When Jesus came, he showed the best way of blessing other people. And we talked about this last week. Love God, love others. It's pretty hard to love other people if we're killing them. Just saying. That seems like a rational thought. Okay? But God still calls people to do things for him. It comes in the form of many different ways. When somebody is called, yes, I'm an example of this. When people are called into ministry and serve the church, when people are called to do something about modern day slavery and to get girls out of the sex trade, when I hear about people getting called to put water wells in Africa, when I hear about people getting called to get out of their church pew and go to the bar and find people who are hurting and need God. When God calls people to legitimately sell everything that they own and go across seas and become missionaries in countries where Christianity is illegal. God still calls people to do amazing and they can appear to be impossible things. For some of us, it's not even that dramatic. God calls us to be better dads and moms. God calls us to let go of the things that are holding us back, the grudge and the anger that we have against our spouse or our exes. God calls us to do amazing things. And what we learn from the Battle of Jericho is that there is nothing that will keep us back from doing what God calls us to do. But as we go to do the thing that God calls us, we better make sure that everything that we receive because of it goes back to Him. Here's one other cool thing too. God will protect you no matter how impossible it seems to be. You know, it's really interesting. I hear about pastors and I hear about people who start ministries, and I don't mean like big ministries, I mean like local ministries too. And they say, I feel God calling to do this, right? And they start going to do it, and God's starting to work. He's starting to break down barriers, and social taboos are not there, and they're doing things that are out of the box and things. And then people start coming to know God, and people start to, become better. They are, maybe they're given a meal or all the different kinds of things that I'm talking about, serving the community. And then as soon as there's some successes, something changes. They become a little bit more arrogant. And they might say something, oh yeah, God's doing all this. But there's still this air that's just like, look what I did. You see what I did? I'm awesome. Pretty awesome. And when that happens, usually is the point when things start to fall apart. Because anytime that we claim God did something and then we attribute it to our own work, we get seen for who we really are. So friends, I'm here to give you like the biggest cheer. I'm your biggest cheerleader. Go and do what God is calling you to do. The barriers will be broken. But stay humble. And come to the realization that it is God doing every bit of it. And anything that you may receive, make sure you give thanks to God and give it back to Him tenfold. Okay? I want to end with like a bit of a story. And I know that this gentleman doesn't listen to our sermons, and I feel bad for using his story without asking him, but I'm just going to. I'm sure he'll be okay. I went to school with this guy. His name's Andy. Andy is a really, really great guy. He's also a little interesting too. He will make you laugh. So I mean, he just really is a great guy. But Andy, him and I went to Trevecca together in Nashville, Tennessee. It's the college that I went to. And Andy was always a little bit different from the rest of us, too. And as God put a calling upon his life, he came to the realization that God was calling him to do something that has never been done before, at least in our denomination. God called him to begin a ministry that reaches out to the LGBTQ community. And let me just tell you something. In our current years and current rhetoric, there's a lot of misunderstandings when you say, I'm going to reach out to the LGBTQ ministry or community. Because there's a lot of people who say, oh, why would you go and be with those people? These are Christians, by the way. Shame on them. Why would you do that? And then he has other people from the other side saying, you're a Christian. You're supposed to hate me. And this guy gets a lot of flack from a lot of people. Because what he's doing is, not what he's doing. What God is doing is breaking down barriers to a community that desperately needs God just as much as you and I need God. And I'm here to tell you that Andy, with his very testimony, the way that he walks, the way that he lives his life, is a constant tribute to what God is doing. He doesn't say it's him. It's God working through him. And thus far, God has protected him in ways that you and I can't even imagine. And people are coming to know the Lord. And people are being loved. And people are becoming disciples of Jesus Christ in a demographic that has all been almost left behind by the church. Walls came tumbling down. He was protected and still is protected. And he continues to give credit where credit is due. It's all about God. Bridges are being built all because of what God has done. You and I are called to do something for God. And you might be saying, ooh, I'm being called? What does that mean? Anytime that God calls you to do what is right, to love Him and to love others. It can be small things, it can be big things. It can be that urge to love somebody who is not loved. It could be that moment when you see somebody on the side of the road, that urge to stop and help them. It could be that urge to go to the Warren Family Mission on Fridays and Saturdays and serve those who don't have food. It could be the urge to quit your job, sell everything, and go be a missionary. And it's unique. It is. But God's calling each of us to do something. The question is, are we allowing the walls to stand, or are we allowing Him to break them down? And as we do them, are we willing to give Him the credit? Because if we don't, I'm telling you, some rough conversations and things that you'll have to deal with. Israel dealt with it. If you keep on reading the Old Testament, you'll find time and time and time again when Israel didn't do as God actually asked, and things fell apart. But God was still faithful. God still loved them. And He still called them out to do something even greater the next time around. So what's God calling you to do? Are you going to do it? If you want to shake your head, yes, you should. Because when God calls, there are no barriers that will keep you from doing what He wants in your life. Let's pray. Lord, when we talk about You calling us to do something, we get uncomfortable. Because, Lord, You might be calling us to do something we've never done before. You might be calling us to a place that we've never been before. You might be calling us to do things that people will actually give us shade for doing. Don't allow those things to permeate our minds, but rather break down that wall and enable us to go and do something. Enable us to go love other people like You love us. Enable us to help those who are in need, those who are hungry, those who are homeless, those who are naked, those who are poor, to those who are lonely, to those who are addicted. God, may nothing stand in our way from doing what You have called us to do. And when we start to do it, Lord, may we not get too big for our own britches. But may we give You all the credit, because You're the one who's doing everything. You're the one for the walls to come down. You're the reason why we have the ability to move forward in life. You're the reason why we don't have sin in our lives. The broken barriers just lay on the ground as You call us forward into the life that You want for us. So work in us, Lord. Call us and do amazing things for Your kingdom. In Your Son's name, amen.